Thanks so much for joining in UFC 283 main event. Craig Allen, one half your host duo, Matt Allen as well. Matt Allen FNP, Craig Allen FNP at Fight Night Picks, the main event that the UFC brass put together on somewhat a short notice. They were not impressed by the main event at UFC 282, Blachowicz versus Ankalaev. It ends in a draw, so Dana White and the boys get together behind the scenes, and then at the press conference they say, hey, Teixeira versus Hill on short notice. That's the main event. That's for the vacant belt. Screw it. We'll do it live. And ultimately, the loser out of all of this is a guy that's now training with Jamahal Hill. They were supposed to fight Anthony Lionheart Smith. He was supposed to fight Hill, and Teixeira was just on the sidelines. He was a coach of a world champ, just hanging out. Teixeira MMA and fitness. But for Glover Texeira, we know the storybook career at this point. 19-7 in the UFC. Had a title shot in 2014 against John Jones. He did not get the win back then at UFC 172. All the judges scored at 50-45, but he built himself back up. He beat Jan Blachowicz. He submitted him. That was wild. He then went on to have a fight of the year last year against Yuri Prochazka and got submitted in the 11th hour in the 5th round. Teixeira's career has been wild, but for Jamahal Hill, can you believe it? He's only the second fighter off Dana White's Contender Series to get a title shot. Alex Perez, the first against Deiveson Figueiredo, and now all of a sudden Jamahal Hill getting this opportunity. And Hill only 5-1 with a no contest in the UFC at this point.
Jamahal Hill has been one of the more surprising Dana White Contender Series alumni, if you will, to make it into the UFC and have long-term success. And I know Sean O'Malley's another fighter, probably the more popular of the two, I would say. But Jamahal Hill has had a very impressive UFC tenure up until this point. And the thing that I've always really liked out of Jamahal Hill, other than the Paul Craig fight, which I remember we brought it up a lot. We were kind of joking about it, like, hey, I hope he really doesn't mean all those things he's saying about his jiu-jitsu.
Training at Black Lion Jiu-Jitsu.
And then, of course, he gets submitted. But for the most part, Jamahal Hill does get better fight in and fight out. He has the same foundation, I would say, but he does add little wrinkles to his game, especially with his striking, that I do really enjoy. But for me, this fight breakdown just comes down to how much Glover Texeira gave in his last fight. Like, I was talking to you about this last week. Really like some old boxing videos. That's what they say when Joe Frazier fought Muhammad Ali the first time. It was, hey, great fight back and forth, but it just took so much out of both those guys that they were never the same after. Yuri hurt his shoulder, so we don't really know what he looks like now. But the fact that Glover Texeira is now 43 years old, there's some miles on that odometer, and he stacked up he went on a long road trip the last time out too. I just don't know how many more fights like that Glover Texeira can get into and still be durable to the level that he's at, because do I think Glover can get on top of Jamahal Hill and ground him out? Without a doubt. Glover Texeira is one of the best offensive grapplers we've seen north of like the middleweight division. But on the flip side, is Jamahal Hill explosive enough to hurt Glover Texeira with a lot of the strikes that he throws? Definitely. I don't doubt that whatsoever. I think it's going to be interesting. Has Hall made enough improvements at this stage of his career to kind of get over his own cockiness, if you will, and just fight as the best version of himself? Or can he fall into some of those traps against a guy like Glover?
Look at the last 3 fights that Jamahal Hill has had off of that loss to Paul Craig, where he got baited in, he gets submitted, he pops his arm, and it's really awkward if you go and just the promo that they had leading into UFC 283, where they have Jamahal Hill kind of dubbed over a lot of shots, where it's like, I'll never give up and I'll never break. Well, you gave up because you broke against Paul Craig, so it's kind of
broke.
It's kind of awkward when they do stuff like that. But if you look at it, performance bonus over Mr. Jimmy Croup, performance bonus over Johnny Walker, that kind of highlight reel, silly, cartoony knockout that he had, and then he gets a bonus and he wins in the 4th round against Thiago Santos. Now, positives in that fight. A lot of negatives in that fight as well. And the same thing can be said for Teixeira. Again, such a gritty performance, but it's like that old WWE line that they used to do on those DVDs that we had growing up, where they were like, these guys leave their bodies on the line. Leave this to the professionals. That's what Glover Texeira did in his last fight.
Oh, without a doubt. Now, here's the problem that I do have based on Glover Texeira and his last fight and where he is in his career. Yuri's not a better grappler than Glover. Like, Glover just took a lot of damage.
No
and
hook, rear naked choke.
That's not like his jiu-jitsu's better. That's like, I don't have a lot more left to give. And if that's the case, you're 43 fighting a younger guy now. And again, I think the skill set of Teixeira can offer the skill set of Jamahal Hill a lot of trouble. If anything, it's the polar opposite of it and should offer him a lot of trouble. It's just Glover fights in the pocket a lot. And yes, he can have success in that pocket. He has great overhands. His left hook is phenomenal. Watch the Rashad Evans fight if you want to see a really nice left hook. All of that pocket fighting, though, means he's going to get hit at a certain point. And you are right. There's some positives and negatives to take from Hill's performance against Thiago Santos. But I said this earlier, and I'm going to stick by it. If you want to disagree with me, feel free to. Thiago Santos looked great against John Jones, but blew both of his knees out, took a long time off, and then came back. He looked like a shell of himself when he first came back, and I know he didn't have a lot of wins after the knee injuries, but I did feel like he was getting better as we saw him progress.
Yeah.
And I know, again, the fighter that we saw against Jamahal Hill isn't the same fighter we saw against, like, Anthony Smith at middleweight, but I did think that version of Thiago Santos was a good test for Hill. He hit him with clean shots, he really made him dig deep and go late in the fight, and that was the good thing about that. Hill can carry his power late, and that was a question mark that I did have.
And there's things to take from both of these guys' performances against Santos. Teixeira got hit by some really, really big shots. I don't know how he made it through there. Santos kind of wanted to grapple maybe, and then Teixeira took him down to that place, and he ended up getting the win. And for Jamahal Hill, he fought wrestler Thiago Santos, and in that fight, he struggled to get Santos off of him, but then at the point where he was able to do it as the fight wore on, Hill was able to get that win. So I love what I saw, because Hill, 5-round fight, new atmosphere in certain respects, especially going to that fourth
and he
round.
got tested too.
Yeah, and he still had that resolve. It's just, if Glover Texeira was at 100%, he was 33, I'd pick Teixeira to win. Again, Teixeira,
he'd be a big favorite.
Under the UFC banner, 19-7. He debuted in WEC. That counts to that record in 2002. He beat Sokaju in WEC in 2006. So it's wild to see that.
Does this matter at all? And it's just a point that I just thought of, so I want to get it out there. The fact that a 43-year-old, in all reality, is only getting like a month camp. Does it take your body a little bit longer to kind of get in fight shape when you are that age? Again, I'm not that old. I don't know the answer to it. I just will be curious to see if that's at least a talking point going into the fight.
I think it's more of like, can he cut the weight? Like, if you do look at Glover Texeira, I watch his Instagram stories every now and again. The last time I did, I screenshotted it, sent it to people. He was sitting in a cold plunge in his backyard, talking just about life, and then he was like, oh, look at the crows, and he just started talking about
I feel like I'd be great friends with Glover
crows
Texeira.
in the trees. But I do expect Teixeira MMA and Fitness a lot. It was controversial, our pick for MMA Gym of the Year. We picked him, even though he lost his belt, but he coached Pereira to a win. It was just wild to see kind of where that gym's gone, and now it's a destination gym that people travel to Connecticut to train with Glover and the rest at that gym. So for me, again, the skill sets are all there with Glover. It's just, how is that odometer going to look like in a fight like this against a guy like Jamahal Hill? We threw it out there to you in the YouTube community tab. Almost 1,000 total votes, 57%. Going with Glover to get the win over Hill. But Matt, I'm really eager to see some of these comments that are out there. Eli Rivas wrote us a paragraph. Eli, I apologize.
I appreciate it, though.
I don't have the time. Artem MMA saying, if Santos can take Hill down 6 times, so can Glover. Then talking about Luan Lacerda. Bill is saying, I think Glover is built to beat a fighter like Hill. Hill's a lights-out striker, but a ground game that's not on Glover's level. Glover's going to drop him at some point, whether it be faked or real. Well, we'll see how that one happens. King saying, sneaky feeling that the old dog has one more title run in him. And Mark saying, Hill by TKO. So, Matt, we know how Chris Jamahal Hill's hands are, and we knew that coming in. I mean, southpaw, tricky. Like, remember his fight against Darko Stuzic? Remember his fight against Popek over on Dana White's Contender Series? Very interesting.
It's a bit of a cheap comp, but it is true. Jamahal Hill kind of is that OSP 2.0 with the way that he strikes. He has long range. He has far better hands than OSP. OSP would really have to bait guys into his boxing, use his kicks a lot more at long range, whereas Jamahal Hill could crowd you with his boxing and then open up with his kicks as a result. And again, I like the skill set that Jamahal Hill has, but this is my big problem. I would have loved to see Glover versus Jan, because A, we already know what we know about those guys, and Ankalaev against Hill, I think, would have taught us enough about both those fighters to help us in a prediction to see the winner of that go up against a Glover or a Jan or even a Yuri, depending on what his injury's like. For all those reasons, and for a few of the unknowns with Jamahal Hill, I'm actually going to go with Glover. I feel like a lot of this video has been me trying to boost up Jamahal Hill and throw a lot of red flags up with Glover. But again, we talked about the skill sets. The skill set of Glover is one that Jamahal Hill's style normally does struggle with. If Jamahal Hill knocks him out in the first round, I wouldn't be surprised by that whatsoever. Like, I'm openly admitting that that is a very real possibility. I just think at this stage of his career, Jamahal Hill has to fight a couple more guys in the top 5, not just go from 7 to, like, the best fighter in the division. It's a big step.
If you told me 2 or 3 years ago that we'd be getting a title fight to start a year between Glover Texeira and Jamahal Hill at 205 pounds, I would have laughed and walked the other way. I mean, I would have thought John Jones would have been there, maybe not till the end of time, because there were some chinks in the armor at the end, and now he's moving up to heavyweight, and Francis Ngannou, does he go to the PFL? I don't know. Thiago Santos did, so we'll see what happens. But Matt, I agree with you in this one, and I have Glover Texeira. I think it's such a fun fight, and it's such a fun week because, again, 6 debuting fighters on this card, 2 making their second times out on the main card. Paul Craig, Johnny Walker, Clash of Styles. You have a great fighter, an all-time fighter in Jessica Andrade taking on Lauren Murphy. I mean, hey, how can you not get excited for these 2 title fights up at the top? They're so much fun, and you can't forget about Gilbert Burns taking on Neil Magny. I know you're really excited about this one. Just before we go, maybe one prospect that you're really looking forward to seeing on this card.
I'm going to shout out both of them. The Bonfim brothers have a huge weekend ahead of them, and I know it's weird when there are siblings in the UFC who have different levels of success. We have seen that on multiple occasions now, but I think these are 2 very skilled and very exciting prospects. So I want to give a little bit of shine to both those guys, because I feel like on Contender Series it was B. Joe Pfeiffer, and a lot of other people got forgot along the way. I guess Bo Nickel's a big name, but a lot of people did get forgotten, and I feel like the Bonfim brothers are in that forgotten boat.
Can't wait for this one. I love the fact that the Bonfim brothers are on the card. So many great fights to look forward to. Question mark kicks, the side kick coming up on Saturday. Make sure you subscribe so you know when these videos drop. And last weekend we had a main event swap out after we dropped the video. So you're going to want to make sure you tune in with Fight Night Picks. Keep it locked in, and as we always say,
let's get into it.